what they did was they set up this, in General Motors it was called the Human Resource Center, or Center for Human Resources, and Ford it had another name, Chrysler likewise, but they had these joint programs which what it essentially did was allowed the company to put money into this third-party separate entity, and it was the wash and rinse cycle. The money would go into the Center for Human Resources and then would be used to reimburse salaries, pension, benefits, and so forth of UAW officials. We learned, not directly from the UAW, but in being able to examine IRS documents, and we have Bill Hanline largely to thank for this, in his research, that about a third of UAW international reps' salaries were being reimbursed from these joint funds. That's an enormous lot of money, millions of dollars. Where did this money come from? It was like a tax imposed on workers. 19 cents per hour. I mean, it started out as what they called a nickel fund. It was 5 cents per hour. Eventually it grew to 19 cents per hour. And there were further fees attached if there was excessive overtime. Now, we could argue that this 19 cents per hour could have gone to health care. It could have gone to in our pockets, for that matter. But it was set aside for the joint funds operation. Part of the problem with this was the union members didn't have any kind of accountability. They didn't know, they had no way of checking how this money was spent, who was getting paid what and for what. While the Labor Management Reporting and Disclosure Act legally binds the union to report to all union members how their union dues are spent, this was a separate fund. This did not come directly out of union dues. It didn't come from the membership directly. It was something that came from the company, but it was supposed to be a benefit for us. And they would tell us, well, you're getting health and safety programs, tuition reimbursement, a number of programs, but like I say, there was not any accountability. Those books were closed. But in effect, it set up a separate entity for the UAW to collect money, to pay its bureaucracy. And this put them in a position where they had a conflict of interest. Now, that conflict of interest started out initially small. It was a nickel fund. And the UAW may have originally felt like it was a good plan and it would help them to have some influence in negotiations. But it was a corrupting influence. And what we saw over the years was that the UAW became more and more cooperative with the corporate agenda, distanced themselves more from the membership, became more amenable to the company's outsourcing, more amenable to the competitive model that would pit workers against workers, competing for lower wages, even in violation of our Constitution. You know, we have an article in the Constitution forbidding, the locals from competing against each other. But in fact, the UAW began to encourage that locals see how they could help the company to save money by competing against another local with working conditions, work rules, wages, benefits, whatever they could do to trim costs. This competitive model eventually got us into the position where now the UAW as an official union has a VIBA that it's responsible for to cover retirees, which is dependent on General Motors stock. So the UAW is in a position now where they may have a decision to make to say, well, do we want to fight this plant closing? When if they close the plant, it will help the stock and improve our VIBA. They have two interests here. The UAW indeed has an interest to defend the membership, to increase the size of the membership, and the benefit of active members. But they also have the interests of the retirees. Those two interests have been put into direct conflict. The seeds of this direct conflict began back in the 80s with the jointness programs, with this cooperative model of negotiations, with the whole idea of teamwork. And initially it was it seemed like, I think, to official UAWs and perhaps to the rank and file that, oh, it makes sense that we want the company to succeed. Indeed, we want the company to succeed, but not at the expense of jobs, pensions, benefits, and wages. But that's kind of how we got to where we are today.
Let's look at the impact of the outsourcing and jobs going overseas. Where did the money to invest in those plants come from? Did it come from the profits of GM? Was that money that came that the workers were expecting to be funding these pension programs, or did the workers have any input on that, or in a sense, were they seeding the future employment ranks out of the United States at the cost to the workers?
Yeah, well, the UAW was presented with this dilemma. The company is going to say, look, we can produce this cheaper at a non-union plant, or we can ship it to Mexico or somewhere else overseas and get the work done there. So either you cut the wages or we're going to ship it. Now this is a direct threat. And I remember talking to Owen Beaver myself back at a time when I could talk to him more openly. And he told me that he was presented with a problem. He said, look, they brought in all this automation to the assembly line, a lot of robots. And it just literally replaced thousands of workers. And he said, what are you going to do? If you can't stop them from automating the plant, and indeed that may not be a good idea, because in order for the plant to be modern and quality and successful, they need to do that. How are we going to maintain these jobs? He didn't have that answer, or what he came up with was the cooperation model and the job bank, in which the company is saying, if you will help us, we will guarantee these jobs. And if this worker is replaced by automation, or because the union members have helped us find ways to innovate and make us more efficient, we're going to guarantee that they get their full salary. Which seemed like a good idea initially, because our thought was no company is going to pay a worker to do nothing. They are going to find work for him, and they're going to invest. And this idea came from the Japanese. The Japanese guarantee lifetime employment. The Japanese model is, if there's not enough work because of a downturn in the market, we're going to keep paying that worker, and we're going to use him for training. We're going to use him to help refurbish a plant or clean the plant, to upgrade it.